A debit note, also known as a debit memo, can be issued from a buyer to their seller to indicate or request a return of funds. This video will be demonstrating how to create a debit note. Debit note is created to reverse accounting and inventory transactions made by a purchase invoice. The debit note partially or completely reverses the transactions induced by the purchase invoice, affecting the transaction journal, the vendor's journal, the VAT journal, if your company is a VAT-payer, and the inventory journal. Debit note corrects the inventory quantities and monetary values. The inventory is decreased by the number of goods specified in the debit note by crediting the inventory account. The debit note credits the values in the income account, and if your company is a VAT payer, in the output VAT account. The liability account is credited by the same amount, by total amount. The value in the COGS account is amended. The debit note will be created and its fields will be populated from the purchase invoice fields. However, you can edit and modify values in the fields if, for example, you had made a partial return or the total amount of the returned goods differs from their original total amount. First, we have to input the vendor-related information, such as the vendor name and the return purchase invoice. You will notice that once we input the return purchase invoice, the purchase manager, vendor contact, and phone number fields will be automatically filled. Then we input the address information and offer terms, bank account information from which you will make payment for the purchase invoice from the vendor. Once we are done, we click the Fill Form Return Invoice button. As a result, the items and their details are retrieved from the selected return purchase invoice and copied to the debit note. Nevertheless, you can edit the information provided and overwrite it if necessary. This can be seen in the Services tab in the bottom group box. Turn on the Advanced mode to view or override the vendor's accounts for advances and liabilities. Debit note reverses accounting transactions made by a purchase invoice. It makes opposite entries to the accounts of liability and advances. The accounts are provided automatically, being retrieved from the selected return purchase invoice. If necessary, you can change them. You can change the accounts in the Update mode. In the VAT Details section, we will find additional information about VAT charged on additional goods and services. Here, we can also see the VAT number and vendor's VAT number. In the Documents Total section, we can find information on the default transaction currency. We can also see the total, net, and VAT amounts of all the goods and services. There is also the Price Indicates VAT option that can be switched on or off depending on if we want the total amount to be calculated with the VAT or not. Once we are done, click the Save button. Don't forget to click the Post button. Remember, if you don't post a document, the system sees it as a draft and doesn't take it into consideration. By clicking Journals button, we will notice that the information has been added to the VAT, transaction, and vendor's journal.